Today we are analyzing Twilight, which I read at the height of its popularity in the 2000s and which I read recently as an adult. And I feel like there has been this Twilight renaissance going on in popular culture, and people love to make fun of Twilight. That's how it was back in the day already, and that's how it is now. And much has already been said and written about how this is tied to the target audience and the majority of fans being female teenagers, and how society just loves to make fun of anything that teenage girls love. And I think there is some truth to that. But I really, really disagree with the idea that Twilight is just this trivial, silly romance that just has zero depth to it. I mean, just the economic impact alone demonstrates that this is really not to be dismissed so lightly. You know, the film series grossed around $3 billion at the box office, and the book series sold around 160 million copies worldwide. So, what are some of the themes that I noticed rereading Twilight as an adult? What are these themes of depth that I mentioned? Well, the first one is pretty obvious: immortality and the soul. I was actually surprised when I reread Twilight because I forgot how many conversations Edward, being a vampire, and Bella, being a human, have about immortality and the soul. I mean, what is there that is more profound for humans than their own mortality? There are entire books that analyze how humans' mortality have preoccupied human cultures and civilizations. For example, this book, Immortality, by Stephen Cave, The Quest to Live Forever and How It Drives Civilizations. And in this book, the author, who holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Cambridge, analyzes many things, but among them, for example, he demonstrates how all of the major world religions offer some version of the afterlife to their believers. And the three main religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, they all talk about literal resurrection in the Holy Scriptures. So this is, I mean, I think you could probably argue that in many ways mortality is what defines human life the most. And related to this is the idea of the soul, because essentially I think any idea of the afterlife only works if you believe that humans have a soul, or that more generally living beings have a soul that can continue living, existing in some form or another after their body has died. If you don't accept this premise, then I think you cannot believe in any afterlife, no matter if it's heaven or hell or reincarnation. And this is something that Bella and Edward discuss a lot, because Edward believes that vampires are immortal, of course, but they are also damned creatures. They have lost their soul in exchange for immortality. So even though they can live forever, their soul has died, I guess. Whereas with humans, it's the opposite. Humans have a mortal body, but they have an immortal soul, and if they die, then their soul lives on. And that's why he does not want Bella to turn into a vampire, even though she wants this, and even though he is one. But I mean, he was turned into a vampire against his will. So this is the first theme. The second theme is love. I mean, Twilight is a romance series. And I think something that is interesting is that there were other super popular book series and movie series at the time that Twilight was popular. For example, Harry Potter and the Hunger Games. And Harry Potter and the Hunger Games, they also include romance. I mean, in Harry Potter, actually, I mean, the idea of Joanne K. Rowling in Harry Potter is that love is the most powerful thing in the entire universe. Even in a magical universe, love is still the highest power of all. It's what saved Harry from being killed by Lord Voldemort. It was the loving sacrifice of his mother that saved him. And in the Hunger Games, there's a love triangle between Katniss, Peter, and Gale. So love features in these two other popular teenage series of the time as well, but they were not ridiculed in the way that Twilight was. And I think that, I mean, Twilight is not the exception. I think in general there is disdain and people scoff at romance literature. And again, I think you can tie this to misogyny. Romance is primarily written for female readers, although women make up the majority of fiction readers in general. So yes, love. Twilight is about love, and love is one of the most significant factors in any human's life, really. I mean, most people want romantic love. I mean, of course, there are other kinds of love as well apart from romantic love, but most people do desire romantic love. And there has already been so much said about how problematic the love is, the romantic love that is depicted in Twilight, and how that's a dangerous influence for impressionable young female readers. However, I think that romantic love in reality is not unproblematic. I mean, there are a lot of problematic facets to love, and I think that Twilight depicts those aspects realistically. I mean, the deep depression that Bella falls into in the second book of the series, New Moon, after her breakup with Edward. Yes, I can see how it's not a good role model, I guess, for young female readers, how she completely loses interest in her life and in doing anything after her boyfriend leaves her. I mean, this really bothered me at the time when I read it, even though I was so young. It really bothered me, and I also couldn't understand it because I had never experienced romantic love. I mean, yeah, of course, not to dismiss feelings of romance that very young people can have, but I had never been in a long-term relationship at that point. I mean, at the age of 12. Nevertheless, it's accurate. I mean, it is a part of romantic love, this devastation and this hopelessness and this deep desperation that Bella feels. It's part of romantic love for many, many people. It's probably something that most people will experience in their life, even if it's problematic. And then, I mean, there's not just the problematic and the negative aspects. Something that really touched me was how in the first book of the series, there's this scene where when Bella and Edward start dating, he he just asks her so many questions about her favorite music and books and her relationship with her grandmother and her favorite gemstone, which then embarrasses her because it used to be something else and now it's a gemstone that reminds her of the color of his eyes, and that embarrasses her. And I was really quite touched by this scene, you know, because I think this reflects how people want to be known. They want someone to know them intimately and to know the details of their life and their thoughts and their feelings and their experiences. They want that intimacy. They want to be understood and they want to be known. And I mean, to be honest, it's rare to find that. Like, I feel like for most people, it will be a rare experience to meet someone who's just so interested in them as a person and who's so curious to get to know them and to learn how they think and how they see the world and what they are like as people. And I think that's what this scene depicts. So that's why I was moved by that. And then, you know, going back to the aspects that I guess people find more problematic is Bella's insecurities, how she feels like she's not good enough for Edward, and she puts Edward on this pedestal and she thinks that he's so wonderful and perfect and that she has nothing to offer. And then Edward has his own insecurities as well, you know, he thinks that he's not the right partner for her because he's a vampire, so he thinks that he's not good for her. Is that unhealthy? How they feel about each other, their anxieties? Yes, it is unhealthy. But again, it's real. It's, of course, not the case for every relationship, thankfully. But those are real emotions that many people go through. And to be honest, like, I didn't know this. When I read this as a kid, I didn't know this. But I have aged since reading Twilight for the first time, and I have had life experiences that I didn't have when I first read Twilight, so now I can really look at this and say, yes, this is part of romance, even though people say that it's problematic that this book depicts it. Third, morality. So the vampires in Twilight, they fall into two categories. We have the vegetarian vampires who have decided to shun human blood even though they crave it and live on animal blood instead. And we have the vampires who feast on human blood. And the vegetarian vampires have opted to live this way for ethical reasons. And to me, this reflects an interesting conception of morality because I think what makes I think the decisive factor is that it's a conscious decision of the vegetarian vampires. It's not that they lack the strength to kill humans. I mean, they are much, much more powerful than humans, so they could easily kill humans. And you could also say that it's just in their nature to kill humans as vampires. But they have the strength to do this, and they resist it because they don't want to be monsters. And this reminds me of Nietzschean philosophy, actually, because Nietzsche argued that there is no inherent virtue in being weak. It's not virtuous to be weak. So what makes these vampires more virtuous is that they are conscious of their own darkness and their capacity for evil, and they are strong, so they could inflict tremendous damage, but they choose not to. And I honestly find this quite compelling, and I think this is something that is applicable to human morality. I mean, humans are capable of evil. But yeah, I mean, then I'm not going to go into the whole debate of free will. Are our actions predetermined, or can we choose whether or not to commit evil? I mean, that's a whole other debate, but I think in the context of Twilight, it's pretty clear that free will exists, because there are vampires who go against their nature, so to speak, and exercise their free will, and there are others who go with their nature. But either way, it's a choice. And then lastly, the fourth profound theme in Twilight that I noticed as an adult reader is classic literature. Stephenie Meyer, the author, she graduated with a degree in English literature. And I think, whether you think that she's a good writer or not, although, if you don't think she's a good writer, I mean, I think she did pretty well for a bad writer, selling 160 million copies around the world. But anyway, regardless of your personal taste and whether you liked Twilight or not, her love for classic literature shines through. There are these conversations that Bella and Edward have about Wuthering Heights, and then in the second book, the entire plot of the second book of New Moon, it mirrors Romeo and Juliet. And then I've also read that there are other classic inspirations for the other books in the Twilight series, A Midsummer's Night Dream, for example, but I'm not going to talk about that because I actually don't know these works, so I couldn't comment on that. That's all I have to say for today about the overlooked, perhaps, depth in Twilight. I mean, yeah, Twilight just deserves to be taken seriously, in my opinion. First of all, because it was and still is to some extent, a huge phenomenon in popular culture. I mean, that alone has some significance and merits being taken seriously, I think. And then, yeah, as I tried to argue and to explain in this video, it's really so much more than just some silly, trivial story. There is depth to Twilight, and I really think that no story that is just silly and trivial would have had the impact that Twilight has had around the world.